put your bookmark in 1 Corinthians as you're turning to 1 Corinthians, and then have we can look at Matthew, or put a bookmark in Matthew and leave your Matthew and 1 Corinthians here. 1 Corinthians 13 is where we're going to be at, known as the love chapter. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. Though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I can remove mountains and have no charity, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profits me nothing. Charity suffers long and is kind. Charity envies not. Charity vaunts not itself, is not puffed up, does not behave itself unseemly, seeks not her own, is not easily provoked, thinks no evil, rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Charity never fails, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, and that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spake as a child, and I understood as a child, and I thought as a child. And when I became a child, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, charity. These three, but the greatest of these is charity. So I wanted to talk about love today. Love is love, right? Love is love. That's a motto of the religious pride, anti-theist crowd. And then also I'm going to name the sermon, maybe so people will watch and see what I have to say about it, because I have a couple good points to ponder. Name it Love is Love, because that's a catchy phrase. And My Body, My Choice, and that's something else I want to speak to just a little bit today. Satan has successfully perverted most good things today. I mean, he's really he's doing his missions well. And one of the greatest things he has perverted is love. I mean, it is. You have the vile, disgusting people of the world that will tout love is love to justify, what it is that is justified fully, which 2-3 generations ago couldn't even fathom. But in 2 or 3 generations, you won't be able to fathom. But it's coming. But they tout this, and they try to justify their pedophilia and sodomy and incest and bestiality. When sodomy gains ground on morality, they say love wins. Love wins. They say love wins when some sort of evil, vile practice becomes more mainstreamed. That's what the world thinks love is. They don't know what love is. They seem to think that any emotion or desire that they have within them is just who they are. I'm going to repeat that. I don't know if you understood what I said. That they really think that any emotion or desire that is within them is who they are. Therefore, it's acceptable. Well, it's the way God made me, or it's just the way I was born. It's the way I am. Let's just accept that premise and say, okay, that's the way. That just doesn't mean it's right. What if a murderer said that? Well, I just was born to kill people. I can't help it. Therefore, should we accept them as a society? How about rapists? My language of love is imposing myself upon others. Should we accept that? They might truly be born that way in their heads. They might truly have those emotions, but is that acceptable? No. We don't accept them saying something like that. That's just who I am, or that's how God made me. Why then do we accept if someone says if they intimately love dogs or their same sex or dead people or children, that we justify it then and accept it because they said, that's just who I am? No, that doesn't make it right. Satan has a concerted effort to move the line towards evil and depravity, and he is very good at it, and he has moved the line considerably. The line is very deep into sin and depravity. First, love is not an emotion. It's not, period. Love is a conscious, concerted commitment for the well-being of. Well-being of what? Well, whatever you have that well-being and concerted commitment for, that is what you love. It is a conscious, concerted commitment for the well-being of. That's what love is. I say it one more time. Love is a conscious, concerted. That means an effort, an efforted. You make an effort to. It doesn't have to connect with your feelings. You have a conscious desire, mental desire, that I am committed to that. The well-being of that. I'm committed to it. Beyond my emotion. Beyond my affections. I am committed regardless. Love is a conscious, concerted commitment for the well-being of. Unconditional love is that love is going to be there beyond any conditions. There's nothing that would break that love. And God unconditionally loves us. Now, I'd like to have an unconditional love for certain things in my life, and that's what you strive for, but God truly does have that. But love is a choice. Love is a conscious commitment for the well-being of. Love seeks that which is loved, your object of your love, to succeed. You want that to prosper. You want it to be well. That's what well-being is, being well. You want it to be well, to be good, to do good. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. That's love. He didn't do it because he felt good about you. He didn't. And people think that because they're loved by God, they're liked by God. That's two completely different things. Look, he didn't even like you when you were a sinner. The Bible says that. He abhors evil. He didn't have to like you. He loved you. And that's pretty special. He had a commitment to make things right between you and him. Okay? He loved the world so much he gave his only Son. Not because he liked us, but because he loved us. And if I had to choose between getting liked and getting loved, I'd have to take getting loved. Because that's what brings salvation. That's the only thing that's going to hold Christ to the cross. Further, people generally love themselves. Now there in Matthew, I told you to hold your finger in Matthew 22. Matthew 22, verse 36. Master, this is the disciples asking Jesus, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Is it to love God? Is it to obey the Sabbath? Is it not to take God's name in vain? He says, what's the greatest commandment? And this is what Jesus said in verse 37. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. He says if there was only one, it would be this one. Love God. But a second is like unto it. He said there's a second, and it's very close, but it goes hand in hand. It's a sister to the first commandment. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and prophets. He says you can summarize all the law and everything that the prophets say. All the Old Testament could be categorized into accomplishing one of two things. Loving God or loving your neighbor as yourself. Wow. You see how Jesus says to love, that you have to love your neighbor as yourself. because we don't really have a problem loving ourselves. Loving as in a conscious, what did I say? A conscious, concerted commitment for the well-being of. You have people that are emos, or or goths or suicidal. That's somewhat of a learned behavior. That's a consequence of something else not happening in their life, because they weren't born that way. Generally, you're born as try and take care of yourself. And how do babies take care of themselves? They squeal for mama to do it. There's only one thing on a baby's mind, and that's itself. And quite frankly, that's the way toddlers are. I mean, all the way up. And it is a parent's obligation to train that out of a child, because the natural inclination is for them to be completely self-centered. And today, a lot of children haven't been trained not to be self-centered, and all they are self-centered adults. But you seek your own well-being. That baby coming out of the womb don't care about nothing else except itself. You have an inclination to love yourself, to be committed to your own well-being. So I guarantee, raising 7 children, I guarantee you that the natural predisposition for a tiny human is to only look out for themselves. And it's a challenge as a parent to get those tiny humans to care about something other than themselves. They go on. I'm telling you, it's hard. You're supposed to do it, and some people they don't ever get it done. They don't ever really try, and they raise spoiled brats. And sometimes those spoiled brats turn into adults that are brats. But I'll tell you, you can have... I don't want to pick on my children. They're just normal. But they go in and they don't care about somebody else getting their fair portion. Naturally, they don't care. They just want to make sure that they get at least as much as they are deserved. They want to make sure that their belly is full. They don't really go in naturally predisposed to say, let's just make sure that everybody else gets enough. Let's just go in and make sure that they get more. No, I want to get my fair share, and if I don't have my fair share, I want to at least have as much as will fill me up. I'm not going to go hungry. You don't think to yourself when you're a 7-year-old child, I'm going to make sure that everybody else is fed before I am. Now, as a mature Christian, I hope that you have some capacity within you to hope that everybody else gets filled up first. But that's not your natural inclination as a child. You love yourself. You're committed to your own best well-being. And Jesus says you ought to love others like that. You don't have to train, under most circumstances, a child to love themselves. Jesus said to love your neighbor like you love yourself. Love is a conscious, concerted commitment for the well-being of. And also, let's note adamantly that we are to love God first and foremost. We are to seek, what does that mean? We are to seek God's well-being. God first and foremost. We ought to see God succeed first and foremost. And that comes with the capacity of hating sin and hating evil. Because that's which offends God. And you don't want to see that which offends God to be successful. You want God to be honored. That's your first and foremost. Then you love your neighbor as yourself. Also, in that note, you love God with your heart, your body, and your mind. Your soul. Your body, your mind, and your soul. That's what it says. Every part of you should have a conscious, concerted commitment for the advancement, the well-being of, the prosperity of God. And then you love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't say you love your neighbor with all your heart, soul, and mind. No, it says love your neighbor like you love yourself. Instead of you being concerned so much about yourself, you need to be that concerned about your neighbor. Meanwhile, you need to love every fiber of your being, all 3 layers of you. Your emotion, your body, your conduct, your mind, what you think about, what you do, what you believe needs to be devoted to God. Love. People don't love God anymore. In fact, I would say the religion of the world. I'd say currently we have a world religion. We have a national religion. People just don't want to acknowledge it. There is no separation of church and state. It's just that the church, the national religion of America, is hedonism. Okay? You know what hedonism is? I've used the term before. Let me define it clearly. Basically, hedonism is the pursuit of pleasure. Pleasure is your God. And the supreme God normally is yourself. You are your own God. Hedonism is a form of self-worship because it is the pursuit of pleasure, loving oneself. No doubt to me that you believe, even in this room, let alone people on camera, believe in some hedonistic principles today because you are lambasted and indoctrinated and brainwashed with them from the time you can talk. You are bombarded with hedonistic tenets. The doctrine of hedonism. What is that? Well, I say, as a Christian pastor, I come to the Word, Jesus says to deny yourself. Now, your teachers in school, all the priests and priestesses of hedonism tell you, listen, follow your heart. You can dream it, you can achieve it. Reach for the moon, and if you land, at least you'll still land in the ocean. I don't know what they say, but follow your heart. Be true to thyself. You ever hear that? Be true to thyself. If you believe, you can achieve. You buy into that. That is the tenet. That is the constitution of hedonism. That you're important. That you're the center of the universe. That your pleasure matters and matters most. Hedonism. You are the superior being in your life. And your pleasure matters most. That's hedonism. That is the state religion. Funded, and it goes right down into... if you take public school aside and you take out the evolution that gets pushed subconsciously and the Big Bang, which is an anti-God theory, origins of the universe via no God, that's a religion. That's a religious philosophy. But let's take out Big Bang. Let's take out evolution. Let's take out all the transgender, queer, and pride stuff that you wouldn't want your children to have. Let's just forget that, okay? You will still be left with a hedonistic value system. Because they're not telling you that God is the most important thing in your life. They're telling you are the most important thing in your life. And if you go through this school, you can make money. Because money means happiness. Look, that's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you money competes with God. And that Jesus Christ will bring you happiness. And Jesus Christ will bring you joy. That's what Christians believe, not money. Not that you need to get educated so you can have a lot of money so that you can go out and fulfill your hopes and dreams. I love animals. I got to be this. I can do this. It's ridiculous. And we public school, government-funded school has raised generation after generation of more deeply involved into hedonism. That's just a reality. You'd be hard-pressed to convince me or anybody else any different than that. Anybody that knows. We mean well by telling these children that they can be anything they want to be and that their hopes and dreams are the only thing that matter in life. But we're doing it, we make them into a God for themselves, and we are reaping the rewards of it. Further, I'll tell you further, but let me see if I lost anywhere on my notes. Jesus said to deny thyself. Satan in America says to fulfill your dreams, follow your heart, enjoy life, live life. Satan says take care of yourself. Jesus says deny thyself. Satan says new mama, don't neglect yourself. Have me time. Satan says young father, don't forego your hobbies and get turned into a dad. They just love making fun of dads and dad jokes and wearing Nikes and dad bods and don't turn into a dad. As if that's a terrible thing to turn into. Divorce is rampant because people pursue themselves. People aren't having children because they're greedy and selfish and self-centered, and we aren't even replacing ourselves as Americans. Our population will be reducing if we didn't have the immigrants coming in. That's fact. That's irrefutable fact. You need 2.4 or 2.6 to replace, and we're under replacement value in our society. Because people want to spend their money and their time on themselves. They are going around proudly calling themselves dinks. Do you know what a dink is? This is a term people made up. Love dinks. And you got these couples, 30, 40-year-old, elite, yuppie. We are dinks. It means dual income, no kids. That's what they are so proud of. 2 incomes, no kids. We're living life to the fullest. That is what people are proud of now. That's what they aspire to. 2 full-time incomes, no kids. I'm going to be an oink. 1 income, 9 kids. I only got 7, but oink don't work. So I guess I got to find 2 more somewhere. But no, my children bring me way more joy than their second income ever would, But they worship themselves. I worship God. We built different. We were built different. People love themselves. Hedonism is essentially self-worship, and we're a hedonistic society. Satan has purposely and successfully converted most people to hedonism, and atheism is a hedonistic principle. You understand that? People desperately want to believe they are not religious when in fact they are very religious. Hedonism is their religion. They are their own God. Abortion is a sacrament of their church. I heard something that made me think about that this week. Listen, God instituted sacrifice way back in the garden, right? God said blood is special. God said life is in the blood. Life is special. God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to shed His blood to remit our sins, right? And so then Jesus said, you should take the Lord's table once in a while. Remember that. And He said, we read that passage. Actually, you got 1 Corinthians 13. Look at 1 Corinthians 11. Take, eat. This is my body. 1 Corinthians 11:24. Take, eat. This is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. That's our sacrament. It's not what we believe imparts grace or gives us salvation. We do that to remember that which imparted grace to us. The communion. And we try to keep it important. We try to make it mean something. When Jesus said, take, eat, this is my body. What does the hedonistic religions do? What do the priestesses of hedon and hedonism say? They don't say this. They say, this is my body, my choice. And then they have an abortion. That's the blood they remember. That's the blood that they have. We remember the blood that was shed on the cross with, this is my body. They go in, they have their communion with my body, my choice. Completely different. A sacrament of hedonism. You say, well, what about rape and incest? Listen, we'll talk about that if you want to get on board about these women that say, I'm going to get pregnant just so I can have an abortion. You tell me about those. You tell me about those that this is an inconvenience, I'm going to have this abortion. Let's talk about those before we ever start talking about the 0.03% of life of the mother and all that. That's not even beginning to get on the radar. I'm talking about the people who go out and spread their legs, get pregnant, and then out of convenience for their own lives, kill that baby. You say, well, it's just a fetus. It could be a life. Are you willing to admit that it could be a life? And you're saying, my body, my choice. Jesus didn't say, my body, my choice. He said, this is my body. This do in remembrance of me. He said, deny yourself, is what He said. And so it's a shame. Our tone went from, this is my body, this do in remembrance of me, having communion, remembering the cross of Jesus Christ, to now our mantra is, this is my body, my choice. Whatever they want to do in the name of convenience, which is hedonism. It's a selfish, prideful society of hedonism instituted by Satan that has no clue what love is. Love is a conscious, concerted commitment for the well-being of. Love is not an emotion. Love is not a feeling. Love is not like. You might not like your spouse. That does not mean you fell out of love with them. Because love is a conscious choice. Love is not lust. You may no longer be attracted to your spouse. I feel for you, but that doesn't mean you fell out of love with them. That means you're no longer a pulsating hormonal teenager. Love is not lust. People confuse lust for love. And we tell young, I say children, but teenagers, and they have a permission to go out and do this stuff. People think that they get a feeling for someone, they love them. They say they fall in love, and if they can fall in love, you can fall out of love. So they say. Listen, that's not love. That's yesterday's taco messing with you. That's lust. That's hormones. That's Satan talking. Love is a conscious, concerted commitment for the well-being of. I tell people I love you all the time because I'm committed to them. That's what I'm saying. I'm committed for the conscious, concerted commitment for your well-being. Above my own even. Listen, I can love people that I don't like. People fall out of lust or they fall out of like. You don't fall out of love. Love is a choice. You choose not to love. People are going to be like, well, you don't know my history, my relationships, and I was abused. And I told you already, well, God didn't send His Son Jesus to die on the cross because He liked us. He sent His Son to die on the cross because He loved us. You need to kindle love. We looked at 1 Corinthians 13, the chapter on love. We're going to read it again. And when we read it again, you don't need to think like or lust. You need to think about how this is talking about a conscious, concerted commitment for the well-being of. What does that look like? Well, you read 1 Corinthians 13 and you see. And the question is, do you love others? Be careful not to love yourself while you're loving others. I got to explain what I mean by that. And y'all ought to get it pretty quick because I've talked about it a lot. Why are you doing for others? Okay? Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it because it makes you feel good? Are you doing it because you would then feel, if you fix that person, would you then have a sense of accomplishment? Well, then who are you loving? That person? Or are you just accomplishing what you want to do so you get that good feeling? You got to be careful. If you're just doing it because you're determined to do it, and it's your mission to get it done, that's exactly opposite of what 1 Corinthians 13 is telling you to do. Okay? I've had people come, and I tell you, it might hit home because it's so prevalent. Adult children is a big deal. Your little pet project person or your pet project child, certain someone that you're committed to fixing. You're going to fix them. A certain neighbor, a certain this coworker, and you're going to fix them. I've had people come and tell me that they're doing something for someone because they love them, and I look at that situation and it's clear that the person they're trying to fix don't care. So it's not actually really loving someone. It's a person loving themselves because it comforts them to think that they're fixing that other person. And it's their goal to fix that person. We're fixing that other person to fulfill our own hopes and desires many times. Be careful you don't do that. We're loving ourselves more and maybe only in that situation. So you should know that principle by now. I ain't going to beat it to death. But it is a big issue, and it has to be said that many people will have convinced themselves that they're loving someone by giving to them and fixing them, when in reality they're only loving themselves because they can't stand to see that other person be evil or otherwise do poorly. And we all have situations that affects us very personally. Be careful with those situations. Love is not serving your own interest by helping others. Meanwhile, also, listen, Ephesians 5 says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, having not spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So I tell husbands, listen, and I have a sermon, a pretty good sermon. Husbands have to love their wives. Wives, you don't have to love your husbands. I don't know where you get that. You have to respect your husbands. And people don't even think about that. But it's pretty deep. I mean, it's amazing that God knew what he was talking about. But he did. And I'm telling you, husbands, you need to love your wife. Love is a conscious, concerted commitment for the well-being of your wife. And I'm serious. You've got to put her above everything else. Money, yourself. Some men need to hear, you don't matter. She does. She is your purpose in life. Money is not. Second to God, she is your purpose in life. You need to make sure she's taken care of, not yourself. Wives, you aren't called to love your husbands like that. You aren't called to fix him. You're called to respect him. I mean, women hate hearing this. I don't know why they hate hearing that so much. I know why, because they want to fix him. They want to correct him. It ain't your job to correct him. Wives have an incredibly hard time not punishing or correcting or making sure that their man knows how wrong they are, and they're going to do that. That's not your job. Because your husband didn't live up to your expectations, that's pride, as if you know how to be a better husband than your husband will be, or as if you know how to be a better husband than God knows how for your husband to be a husband. He don't live up to your expectations. That's absurd thought right there. But anyways, when he don't live up to your expectations, what do? And here's a somber reality. Since I'm on it, most wives will create their own husband. Okay? Most husbands are a product of their wives. Wives, you had a crappy husband. You picked him. That's the cliche. Not only did you pick him, you made him. You say, well, I didn't make him that way. Well, let's just think about that. Listen, generally, men generally get a kind of woman of their own choosing, and then women generally are responsible for what their husband becomes. If your husband is a monster, you might want to reflect within, and if you immediately say that you did nothing to make him that way, then I will say definitely you were the problem. If you don't even start to reflect if you did anything wrong, then yeah, you were the problem. And pride is the root of that problem. You destroyed your husband because in your pride you thought you knew what a better husband would be. And your actions created your king or your fool. And you created a fool. What do I mean by that? Well, there's an old fable that says inside each of us live a good person and a bad person, and they're fighting. Or I think it's a good wolf and a bad wolf, and they're fighting. You ever heard that? And you say, which one wins? Well, the one you feed, because that's the one you're making stronger. You want the good wolf to beat the bad wolf, you better feed the good wolf. That's nice. Here's a better one. Okay? Wives, inside your husband lives a king and a fool. And the one that you speak to is the one that's going to show himself. You understand that? And when wives go to their men and they say, speak to him like he's a fool, which man do you think is going to come to the surface? And which one are you talking to? If you want to talk to the fool, that's the man you're going to get all the time. and you go and you talk to him like he's a fool, that's what you will get. That's the one that's going to come out. That's the one that you're going to be speaking to, because the king inside of him ain't going to come out and listen to you snarky, sarcastic, bad-mouth, silent treatment, rude. The king in him ain't going to come out and hear you talk to him like that. But the fool sure will be there. And when the fool shows up tomorrow, it's because you called him out yesterday. Women. And if you want a king, you can go to your husband and speak to the king that's inside of him. And that might be what you get in your home. A leader. The leader in your home. But you're not going to see the leader because you got him stifled down and you too busy calling out the fool inside of him. That's the way a lot of marriages end. And then you say, "Whoa, I can't do that." That's why you got a fool. That's why you got a fool, women. That's the one you call out. You ain't got the leader because you have never spoken to the leader. You've never talked to the leader. You've killed the leader and you've fed the fool. And the fool is one out in your husband. And that's all you got left. And then you throw him away and get another one. Men, your job is to love your wives. I tell you, when you have a bad relationship, there's a lot of times that one person can step up and start the improvement in that relationship. When things are real bad, it's pretty bad. But I will tell you another thing, that when both people start respecting and accepting their roles, the husband to love unconditionally his wife, and the wife to respect unconditionally her husband, I tell you, relationships can get real good real fast when that happens. And when both aren't doing their job, they can get real bad real fast. If men would just dare set themselves aside and look at their wives like that's the most important thing in their life, second to God, you'd have a lot better homes. It's not an emotion. It's not a lust. It's not an infatuation. It's a decision. It's an effort. 1 Corinthians 13. Now I'm going to even say something else. We're going to read it again. I think we'll read it again at the end. We read it all through once. But I will see, look here at verse 1 just a little bit. I do have a comment on verse 1. Verse 1 says, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal." You ever hear wind chimes? I guess they don't sound bad. But there's no order to them. Who would describe wind chimes really as music or playing a song? You get a good set of wind chimes and they're kind of interesting to listen to, but there's no order to them. Good wind chimes, they might have a pleasant sound for a while, and most of the time I end up needing a break from them. But wind chimes are not music, and they're dependent upon the wind. Too much wind, and there's too much music, or lack of, and no wind, you don't get nothing. In this verse here it says, you can have all the ability in the world, but without love, you're like a wind chime claiming to play music. You're just at the mercy of whatever wind comes along or doesn't. Your abilities mean nothing without love. And we can set this chapter. This chapter is called the love chapter. Let's set the record straight, okay? You need context. This is actually a parenthetical chapter, which means Paul was writing a letter to the Corinthians and really getting into it and telling us some good stuff. And he says, but hold on, wait a second. Chapter 13. Little parentheses. The whole chapter's of parentheses here. And he goes on to explain something. Why did he insert this parentheses in there? Now I want to tell you, you can go back and you can start at 8, you can look at 9, you can look at 10, you can look at 11, you can look at 12, and you can get a gist of what he's doing. He's telling these people how to be a church. He says, you guys, you need to figure things out. Okay? There is conduct that would be becoming of Christians. Okay? But number one is you need to have a consideration of each other. They said, well, them guys is going over there eating idol meat. He says, listen, if it bothers these guys to eat idol meat, you should be a vegetarian. That's what Paul tells them. That's what you do in a church. Man, Paul is like, he's having to tell these guys, that's what you do in a church. He said in verse 9, and then in verse 11, or chapter 11, we just looked, he's telling them how to have communion. He says, you guys are coming together, and literally he told them what I told you guys about the little kids. Some of you are coming in and you're drunk and fat over here, and bloated and farting over here, and these guys are there starving to death. That's not how you operate in a church. That's what Paul tells them. And then he says, and you guys need to have spiritual gifts. You need to want spiritual gifts. That's chapter 12. The immediate chapter before here. He says, you need to do all these things, guys. But then he says, wait a second. Wait. Chapter 13. I don't care. This is essentially what he says. I don't care how spiritual you are. I don't care how much you know. If you don't have love, it's worthless. It means nothing. That's what he's saying. This is not for you to learn to go out and evangelize lovingly. Okay? This is how, essentially, love within a church. Paul is saying what I've said time and time again in many instances. It's not your actions as much as the why. It's not the what as much as the why. Why are you doing it? I said earlier in the sermon that many people love others but really love themselves because they're doing something for others to appease their own desires. Look at verse 3. And this is what Paul said, though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and I have not charity, it profits me nothing. That's exactly what I said. You can go out and give all your money to the poor. You can go out, you can sacrifice yourself. Going home, let's say there's a burning fire. You can run in and heroically grab up all 6 little infant children and 14 dogs and carry them out to safety and be a hero. But if you're just doing that so you can be the hero, that's not love. That's just love of yourself. You can offer yours, and that's exactly, he says, though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profits me nothing. We know charity to be the word for love. I mean, and most people will just read this chapter and substitute the word love for charity. You know, but there's a much more accurate word that we have today to translate this to. If people want to translate this, and we've been talking about love, and they want to translate the word charity to love, but I'm going to, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to ruin your Sunday school childhood. I ruined Noah's Ark, and I ruined Armor of God, and I ruined David, and I ruined Jonah, and I've ruined all these different ones. I'm going to ruin this one for you too. The word, if you go back and you can follow, it's called etymology, not entomology. That's the study of bugs. But etymology, you can study words back to where they came from and why we have words. And we have a word today. Okay, you got charity, and that's what the King James Version uses there. But then there's another word that we still use that isn't a weirdo word. That goes right back to the same roots that charity came from. It's the exact same words. They're sisters. They got the same grandparents. And that word is care. It's simply care. I think that absolutely accurate translation of this is care. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and I don't care, I become as a sounding brass. I'm like once in a while we have old buildings and the wind will blow and you have that wind will pick up the tin on roof and flop randomly all night long. That's about how you sound if you don't care and you're just going through the motions. That's what Paul's saying. if you don't care, if you don't have a love, a care. That's what I've been saying so much. I said it last week. I coined the term. You got atheist and anti-theist, and now you have apatheist, which would the root word would be apathy. I don't care. And that really explains society. People, our church isn't mostly empty now. Look, Center Street Baptist Church started in 1942, and it's gone over to a woman pastor. They closed that church down, which is one of the most prevalent churches when I was growing up in Marshalltown. And it's over to a liberal church with a woman pastor that's wanting to focus not on giving the gospel, but by diversity, which is a cliche word for being liberal and yuppie. And they closed because they can't fill pews and sustain a ministry. And we're half empty here. Why? It's not because people can't get here. It's because people don't care. And they don't care about God. People don't care. This chapter is telling you to care. You can have all the gifts. You can be the smartest in the world. You can have all the knowledge. You can heal people. But if you don't care, it means nothing. Charity, care, I guess you can probably even see the resemblance. Care a little bit. Most people do what they want to do and are what they want to be. And if they're not doing good, it's because they don't want to. It's because they don't care. I'm going to read the chapter here, and I'm not being rude when I don't want to take away and detract from the word, but I truly believe it's an accurate representation when you say charity means care, and in the tone of love. And I'm going to read it here with the idea of caring a little bit. Though I can speak all the languages and even the languages of angels, and I don't care, I become as a sounding brass or tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, all wisdom, and though I have all faith so that I could move mountains and I don't care, I'm nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not care, it profits me nothing. I can do all the good in the world. I can follow all the laws. But if I didn't do it because I cared, it meant nothing. Caring makes you patient. Okay? It says caring suffers long and is kind. Caring envies not. If you care, you don't vaunt yourself up. It's not puffed up. It does not behave itself unseemly. It seeks not her own. It's not easily provoked. Caring, if you care, you don't think the evil. You don't want the evil. And you rejoice not in the iniquity, but you rejoice in the truth. And when you care, you can bear all things. You bear all burdens is what it means. That is. Actually, they added that. It says, you bear all. You can take anything. You bear all. And when you care, you believe all. You're optimistic, and you hope when you care. You give people the benefit of a doubt. And again, this is in the sense of people, of Christians amongst Christians and in a church. He says, endure all things. Care. When you care, you don't fail. Verse 8. You can have prophecies. They'll fail. Listen, your prophecies will give way. And there'll be people in there speaking in tongues and giving prophecies, and they won't happen. They're going to fail you. But you know what won't fail, church? When you care. That's love. He says in verse 9, you think you know. That's what he's saying here. You think you know. But you just know a little bit. You just understand a little bit. You just prophesy a little bit. But when Jesus comes and sets up his kingdom, verse 10, you won't just know a little bit. All your little bit of knowing and a little bit of understanding is going to pass away. He says, when I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I loved as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass, darkly. They didn't have good mirrors then. But they had some sort of a mirror, polished up nickel, where they put silver nitrate on glass or something. Anyways, polished up. And when they looked at a mirror, it wasn't like what we see now, They just a very blurry rendition of themselves. Like you looking on that gloss on your car on a sunny day, or maybe in just the glass. Sometimes you see your reflection in a clear glass. You can kind of see when the sun's just right. And I won't want to be trying to pluck my eyebrows on that image, they look uglier than they do before, But it'd be a rendition of what you are. That's what he's talking about. You see now like you're plucking your eyebrows on the reflection in the wax of your car. That'd be the equivalent of what you're doing here. We see now through a glass darkly. But then, listen, you're going to see face to face. It says this, it's like you're looking at Jesus through the fog right now. He says, one of these days you're going to see him clear. Now I know in part. I only know a little bit now, Paul says. But then shall I know even as also I am known. He's saying, listen, Jesus knows you completely. And one of these days, in spite of only knowing him a little bit, you're going to get to know him just as good as he knows you. I say today to people, Jesus knows you completely. That should scare people. He remembers the things about you have blissfully and chosen to forget. Those evil deeds and evil thoughts and evil ways and evil nature. And when I sit there and people, how dare he talk about me or my divorces or my belief system like he does. And you sit there in pride forgetting what you were 40 years ago or what you were 10 years ago. And you forget a lot of things that is you prefer not to remember. Jesus still knows those things. Jesus knows you very well. And you know what the great thing is? He still loves you. He still, through all of that, though he knows you better than you even remember yourself, he still has a conscious commitment for your well-being. That is a good Savior. Amen? Let's pray. Precious Heavenly Father, I pray that you help us to love each other better, even within our own church as need be, but also and especially within the church, the big C, all Christians, all your children, all your born again, renewed, redeemed family. I pray you help us to love better. And a lot of people want to take this and they just want to talk about love generically. And how can anybody know what love is if they don't have you to begin with? And I don't know how they can begin to fathom love if they reject you. And if they reject you, they reject what love really is. So I would hope and pray that people would come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ and the work on the cross, and that they'd be born again so that they may know and understand what true love is and have the capacity to love. In the meantime, that we love you and love each other like we ought to. In Jesus' name, amen. 401.